want to just ask you first if this is all, we're talking transfers because we were first dealing with accreditation. Is there something wrong, or is accreditation right? Is there something we should be doing differently there in the first place?
Well, I mean, that process itself changed. Maybe one of the administrators might explain. So we have new terms now as far as testing things.
Well, specifically, I guess I'm asking, should it be on a district level, or do you think that certain schools should be accredited?
Sure. I think that we should begin to look at it from a more comprehensive approach. We have a legislation that I've filed, and many others in the Senate, to deal with the school buildings being accredited versus the overall district. That way the money tends to stay within the district and not leave out of the district.
And if they were to transfer, they might transfer within the district, perhaps.
Absolutely. And that can be by way of a charter school. They can stay within the public school. So we're looking at ways to make it a little bit easier to deal with when it comes to the accreditation.
And certainly from the administrator standpoint, one of the things in our plan is to look at it building by building. When we looked at our situations where our schools that are struggling or have fallen into the unaccredited status, oftentimes they have some wonderful buildings within the district. But when we label a district unaccredited, oftentimes we may see some of those wonderful buildings torn apart because people are leaving because they can, or because maybe they think there is something better. But when we look at the numbers, oftentimes as many as half of the schools would fall into what would be considered provisional accreditation or accreditation within a district. So we do think also, much like the Senator's plan, that we need to start looking school by school and maybe start there with transfers within a district before we start transferring students outside of their district.
That's right, Paul. I mean, Casey, most people don't realize that some of our best schools are in unaccredited or provisionally accredited school districts, because they look at these school districts in aggregate. And as Paul said, half of these school districts, even in the provisionally accredited, score above the 50% mark. I don't know how well known that is out there.
Elisa talked about the different plans that are on the table. I think all of you are invested in a different angle or a different perspective on a certain plan. Can you help us understand what are these plans from the administrators, would you say?
Kind of the way we came about devising our plan is we tried to draw people from all over the region, or the state, I should say, excuse me. So we had Kansas City involved, St. Louis involved, Southwest, Northeast, Northwest Missouri, but we all came together at Massa's headquarters and really tried to look at what have we done right and what have we done wrong. And certainly our self-reflection, we looked at it and said, as a group of superintendents, we maybe didn't do that great of a job of helping some of our struggling schools. We've got to reflect. It's all of our job to do that. I mean, it's the legislature, it's the C or the Education Plus of the world, it's the SE. But when we looked at it, we looked at Normandy, and it was kind of a realization when they've been provisionally unaccredited for 17, or provisionally accredited for 17 years, and we did nothing to really try to help support getting better. And then all of a sudden, one year we decide, now it's time you're unaccredited and we're going to make these drastic changes. So our plan, one of the things we started, we think community schools matter. We all know in St. Louis, one of the first things we hear, where'd you go to school? And that's the same in rural Missouri. That is something that's the same everywhere we go. Schools make up our communities. Oftentimes that they are the fabric. So that's one thing that we start. One of our premises is community schools are important. So how do we fix the community schools so that we can keep those intact? Because we don't see it as a good thing for Missouri and a good thing for communities to start closing schools.
Are Republicans and Democrats equally interested in getting this issue figured out at the state level?
Yeah, this is a top priority. We're both in the Senate, and we actually, hearings are going to start this coming week. The senator and I, as well as 6 other senators in the St. Louis area, we started working together in July to try to, what tends to happen in the General Assembly is you get down there in January, and by by April or May, you kind of have a consensus opinion of basic things, and then you go to negotiations. So what we did throughout the course of summer and the fall was to get that stage done first. So the net result of that is that there were 6 senators in the St. Louis area. We all filed exactly the same bill. Senator Nasheed filed a bill a little bit different, but with a lot of the same things in it. And then Senator Chappelle Nadal has her bill that's but nonetheless, there's a lot of reoccurring themes in all the bills. And all that really is, though, that's the starting point. But the starting point we all came to was, in the off season, not in the start session. So next week, I think on Wednesdays, the hearings begin. The hearings will last for at least 2 weeks, and it's going to be a process of negotiation over the period of the next 6-8 weeks. And it's a really interesting time in the General Assembly because you've had a long period of time where people who are for choice and reform and changes, and they've made attempts to introduce those things into law without much success. We have the situation we're in right now, and like it or not, the students in those unaccredited districts have lots of choices. They're going to dozens of school districts. The interesting perspective from the reformers' point of view, though, is that if this continues exactly the way it is, those school districts will go bankrupt. There'll be no more choice. So for people that want to see reform, they have an incentive to do it. The administrators in the school districts, and they like to see this resolved. We in St. Louis would desperately like to see an outcome. So I think we're going to get to an outcome. We're going to get to a solution, but it will be an interesting and intriguing process.
Can you give us a sneak peek of what it might look like?
I think that at the end of the day, we're going to come with a piece of legislation that will be very comprehensive. We're talking charter school reform. We're talking social promotions, accreditation. So it's going to be a broad range.
So some of the things I think you'll see. I think you will see. I think kids will still be allowed to transfer, but I think the receiving school districts will have a criteria by which they can accept the children, or they can say, look, we're at 100% capacity. We don't have the capacity to receive them. Because one of the overarching themes is that children have a right to an accredited education now, not 5 years from now, not 10 years from now. So that's important they get that. So I think you'll see children will still be transferring, I think, on a much more dramatically reduced scale. One, I think you'll see some expansion of charter for sure. Charter schools right now are kind of limited in terms of who can and can't sponsor them. I think you'll see that idea. The idea of accrediting schools versus school districts, that's something that I think that's definitely going to happen because there's broad consensus around that as a really good idea. I think, so what would happen if you're an unaccredited school district, the first right that a student has is to find that accredited school inside the unaccredited school district. So I think some of those things are things where there's things that are in agreement.
Yes.
There's a couple of proposals that have this idea of a statewide kind of achievement school district, and I think that has a lot of, there's a lot of people that are coalescing around that. But at the end of the day, though, you have education establishment has a really strong sense of what they'd like to see. Reformers would like to see some reforms. I think we're in those rare moments where both sides really need this to be resolved this year, and that really hasn't happened up until now.
And it seems like we're taking we are reacting, because now we have to ask ourselves, how do we get here? I mean, how do we get to a point where we're passing children from one grade level to the next, not knowing how to read on third grade level if they're going to the fourth? How did it happen? And until we begin to put mechanisms in place to get those students to where they need to be, we're going to continue to have this same problem. We're going to talk about we shouldn't have to talk about a child having to go outside of the district, because they should be able to get quality education in the district in which they live. And it's unfortunate that it's happening this way. Children should not have to go outside of their district. And the question is why? Why are we allowing children to fail?
But those are things that we probably can't resolve. Those are big
But
issues.
we can resolve it. Yes, we can. We need to put resources in place. If you know that a kid is not proficient in the areas of math and science, why can't we put funding towards tutoring, where kids can go to after-school tutoring inside the school building?
Well, it's a great point. And when you asked earlier, Casey, what needs to be changed, or does anything need to be changed with accreditation, I think Paul hit on the point earlier. We can no longer sit back for 17 years and watch a school district struggle and do nothing to help them until they've fallen below the bar, and now we're saying, okay, your kids can transfer out. So I think we all agree that the kids are best served when they get to stay in their community. We certainly know the communities are best served when the kids are staying in the community. So whether we look at the accreditation or we don't, we have got to get in there, to your point, and do something so this prolonged struggling of schools doesn't continue.
The department will be go ahead.
I would just like to react to all of that. I think there are two very different issues that we're talking about,
Okay.
and the transfer situation has certainly elevated the conversation of what do we do now. And so the department going out and seeking plans and looking about how to solve the issue really comes from the authority granted through Senate Bill 125 that we just was enacted last year.
That's Senate Bill 125, sponsored by Senator Nasheed.
Very good.
Well done.
And so that gives the department authority to look at something different. And so I will, I accept the fact that we've had schools in failing situations for decades, and that's certainly an issue. I will not say that people have not been trying very hard at trying to intervene in those schools, and some things just haven't been working. So the question is, what do we do differently? What do we do the same? What is working, what's not? Some of the issues that you just addressed. We do see that. I will say a common theme that we are seeing in the plans is that it should be done school by school. That is a different approach to the Missouri School Improvement Program that the state has seen, because for, again, decades we've talked about it. The board needs to be with central office needs to be with the principal needs to be with the teachers need to be with the students, and it's that system. This is really empowering the school building and looking at them on a school-by-school basis, which we did start somewhat with MSIP 5 and producing building level reports, because we thought that was really critical, that a parent could see the differences in performance. This is really elevated in a larger urban district where you do have very high-performing schools, very low-performing schools. You don't see that quite so much outstate, just simply because the sheer numbers. If you have 3 buildings or 2 buildings in your entire district, it can't be hidden by or masked by the other performance in the state. So these are great issues. I just wanted to point out that they're really two.
And I by
issues.
no means meant to say that Normandy didn't
No.
do things.
Right.
I
But
understand.
I think from our perspective, we could have done more. And I think that's one of the things that's a big piece of our plan is earlier intervention.
And so
when we
we-
look back and say, what did we do? And we say we didn't do
We
enough.
didn't do anything.
So we're looking to try and intervene
We
sooner.
have 15 weeks, and in those 15 weeks, like all the things that allowed school districts to be cruising on accredited and to ultimately become unaccredited, we probably aren't going to solve those perfectly. We have an operating problem. What do we do? What's the law said? The law says that every single child can leave, show up on a doorstep of a school district, and they have to be allowed to come in. And you're probably one lawsuit away from transportation being paid for too. So as much as we need to solve the intermediate and long-term problems with education, we have an operating problem that has to be reconciled in the next 15 weeks.
We
But
do.
in order to solve the problem, it's a simple solution. Educate the kids. You educate the children, and they won't have to go outside of the district because they won't be in the failing school.
But that won't fix the problem by the end of the school year when
But
Normandy
it-
says it's going to be out of money. I mean, they're not going to turn in accreditation. I believe the state has said it
By
will
March.
sustain
Yeah.
improvement.
Yeah. The other thing that we haven't touched on, I think most people realize this, is that when this came about in June, and we had very little amount of time to do this. If you look at Normandy, for example, 76% of the students in Normandy stayed. So they spent a lot of money and are spending a lot of money to transfer kids. It's a huge strain on their budget, and they're still trying to educate 76% of their district. The same thing is true at Riverview. So when you look at the 2 school districts combined, right around 24-25% transferred. What are we doing for the other 75%? So transfers are great. I think we have a great example of one here where they really work when the kids transfer, but we still have to address the rest of the kids, the majority of those kids.
Is there a plan that is in leading the pack right now for something that might be implemented?
No, and I'd really like to be clear on that. We have just received the plans. We haven't even had an opportunity to fully vet in great detail every single one of them. That is our plan for this coming up week. What we're going to do is organize each of the plans, and we really want people to talk about the concepts. We don't want to talk about the superintendent's plan or the C-Trust plan or the charter school plan. We want to talk about how are they dealing with governance? How are they dealing with school choice? How are they dealing with principals? What are they doing with their classroom teachers? Let's really talk about issues, what's going to make a difference, and then take the best from each one of those, pull it together. But time is really short for us too. So we are having a public hearing, I'm just going to say that, in St. Louis on February the 4th. You can make your comments online. Anybody that's watching, all of the plans are posted. We're asking for feedback. We know people have lots of ideas about how.
And Senator, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'll give you the last word here on this.
The plan, will the plan be come by way of legislation or?
Well, that's why we're really working to get this done quickly. We are taking
That's
it
why
to
we started in
our
July.
state.
Exactly.
Well, we are working.
Great question.
we're not sure. Some might require legislation, some may not. And so we have a meeting with our State Board of Education February 10th, a special meeting, another one on February the 18th. If we do have something that does require legislation, we will still have time to get that done. But at this point, we're not.
And I truly believe if we're going to fix the problem, we have to stop social promotions. We can not continue to allow for children to pass from one grade to the next, knowing that they're not fit. And we're not
As long as your
saying,
plan continues to keep the personal education, I mean, we can't promote and then expect to do the same thing, or retain and expect to do the same thing over and over. Your plan spells out.
That's right.
Very explicit personalization of education.
Let's leave it on a point of agreement right there. Thank you.